Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I am proud to introduce you to Marion Short, a clinical neurogeneticist and educator who serves as a mentor and example of excellence for those interested in the STEM field. Thank you for joining me this morning, Marion. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
So, as I was doing some research, of course, the complete fangirl nerd in me wanted to know everything I could about neurogenetics. So, tell me a little bit about how you got your start in the exciting field of neurogenetics.
Well, I think what pulled me in originally was genetics itself. From high school on, I was thinking, yes, I had ripped down my Beatles poster and put up the Punnett Square. You know, I was spending too much time thinking about the Beatles. um, and um, and that continued, through college. And I was lucky to have a summer job with Project Hope in Jamaica, where I was the cytogenetic technician for the West Indies.
Oh, now that's a very big title. Tell me what that means.
Well, it meant that I had a microscope, one beaker, and a bunch of slides.
I got it.
Um, and I would take blood samples, and or I would take buccal smears where you scrape the inside of your cheek, um, and to prepare basically chromosomal display. So I could see your chromosomes.
Marion, let me break it down a little bit for the layman amongst us. In layman's terms, can you go over exactly what you do in terms of research and education? Because I know both of them tie so closely together.
Right. Um, there's a fair amount of education that I have to do as part of my practice because um, the amount of science that patients get can vary dramatically. And so that I love to recall Jay Leno's Man on the Street interview that 70% of Americans did not know that plants have DNA. So you have to start from where the person you're working with is. And so to understand um, the significance of genetics in their health.
I know a lot about that. Actually, I learned more about it just about 11 years ago when I was diagnosed with heart disease. And I, of course, I should have known. I'm now the national volunteer for the American Heart Association. And as I've learned over the course of the last decade, that my genetics did, in fact, play a very large role. I am a fourth generation heart disease survivor, I like to say, because I am still here. And we can trace it back to my grandmother's grandmother, that she had cardiovascular issues also. And I think that's very important for future generations and my family so that we can be mindful of what our genetic history is, especially when it comes to an underlying disease as serious as cardiovascular disease.
Well, it's one of the common uh, that I hear from people is that, well, when I ask, what did your grandparents succumb to?
Mm-hmm.
Old age. I go, well, old age is not terribly specific.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have to get beyond that point. And, uh, but having, as you've had a firsthand experience, um, that goes a long way. And I think once you point out that genetics goes beyond just your hair color,
Yes.
your eye color,
Mm-hmm.
that there's an understanding.
Marion, in reading more and more about your background, I was so impressed with you as a woman in the STEM field. So I have to ask, in this age where mentoring is just so important, do you mentor girls who are seeking such a career for themselves?
I was very lucky that my family's GP was a woman, and she was a graduate of the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia. At a time when you didn't have to go to college to go to medical school. It was more like the British system that you started medical school after high school. And I always admired her. I admired what she knew, and I admired what she knew that she didn't know. And so that I had that mentor figure from the get-go. Having that mentor figure was very important, especially as I went off to college.
Marion, share with us some of the most fascinating things that you've learned about the nervous system.
Well, it's the old real estate adage: location, location, location. Is that when you are presented with a problem, you have to figure out where in the nervous system is the problem. Now you get a big hint if the person says they're diabetic and they're complaining of tingling in their toes. Well, yes, neuropathy involving the small, very small nerves at the ends of our feet get involved very quickly. And so knowing the history, the medical history, that gives you a jump start. If someone, as we were talking earlier about cardiovascular disease, that cardiovascular disease is simply limited to the heart. It also affects the brain. So if someone says that they've had 2 heart attacks, and they still have some deficit related to those heart attacks, I know they're at risk for having a stroke. So that you put a lot of that together right off the bat in terms of possible etiologies.
It's almost like you're figuring out a puzzle.
Oh, it is. It is very much. And the neuro exam is very much, it's very logical.
Okay.
But one of the most wonderful things about it is that you learn so much just watching someone come into the room.
What research areas within neurogenetics really interest you the most? This is such a big topic.
Well, when I started out, we were still looking for genes. If the genome had not been sequenced. And so if you had a family that had a genetic syndrome, you knew that they shared some genetic information. And so you looked at it in terms of markers from different chromosomes. You looked to see what they shared, what they didn't share. Because when you start out, you don't know where the gene is. Where is it? What chromosome is it on? Sometimes you get a big hint if you're dealing with someone with Alzheimer's or early onset Alzheimer's. If it's somebody with Down syndrome, then you know that it's chromosome 21. For anyone contemplating whether or not they've inherited a disorder, is that what you inherit is a risk. You don't necessarily inherit the disease. And so my breast cancer is not the same as my grandmother's breast cancer. Okay. And I may have, missed the bullet. Okay. So that getting that understanding is very important, because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, my genes are against me. Not necessarily.
I agree with you 100%. I said to you that I'm a fourth generation survivor. My grandmother had a triple bypass when she was in her 80s. She lived to be 99, but her daughter, my aunt, passed away in her 40s from heart disease. And I'm sorry, in her 50s. And her son passed away, meaning my cousin passed away in his 30s from heart disease. But my grandmother lived to 99 with heart disease. I'm hoping I'm on the end with the grandmother, okay? But it makes the exact point that my breast cancer is not the same as your breast cancer, even if we both have that genetic predisposition.
Exactly. And you see that in other disorders that are not necessarily genetic. I think you start with, I like to think of it as the premorbid personality. You can give someone, you think about multiple sclerosis, which is a large neurologic issue. You can look at two people with the same number of MRI findings, and one of them is walking and one of them isn't. And so it's what you bring to whatever you have to deal with. So if you come with optimism, it helps.
Dr. Short, I'm fascinated with all aspects of your area of expertise, but outside of work, what are your passions? What are the things that wake you up in the morning?
Well, I would say I'm a frustrated pianist. I got pretty close to Carnegie Hall when I was a medical resident, but I had to buy a ticket.
Don't we all?
One of my other areas of passion is reading, and I volunteer in a bookshop that sponsors scholarships at my alma mater. And I just love telling people about, oh, you might like this book if if you like this kind of detective story.
Yes. Fantastic.
And so that and travel.
Marion, I've had such a great time chatting with you today. What's the one thing you'd like the viewer of this video feature to walk away with?
Well, what I would like them to walk away with is that all things are possible. I'm a kid from a town of 1,200 with hearing loss. I managed to get to college, get to medical school, have wonderful practice, have wonderful colleagues. It's a wonderful field. And I just think that we could do so much more to improve health. And I look forward to seeing those improvements in my waning years. But it's a huge area of our culture. And you learn about other people's culture if you listen. And that listening is the key.
I am 100% in agreement with you, and I think you and your career and your philosophy really speak to one of my very favorite quotes, that you are braver than you believe and stronger than you seem and smarter than you think. And I just really and truly believe that, especially when it comes to women of achievement. So it has been a pleasure chatting with you today, and I thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.